the 1st of October, 2022, Manaslu Base Camp. 9 in the morning, hundreds of tents from dozens of teams are slammed in under a minute by a wall of snow, with an air blast running in front of it. 35 tents are reduced to scraps. Down below, not a single fatality. And a few hours later, higher up the slope, between Camp 2 and Camp 1, the same mountain strikes a second time, and this time, there will be no miracle. One of Nepal's most experienced high-altitude guides vanishes from the fixed line. A man who stood on the summit of Everest 6 times, and on this very mountain 5 times. His name is Dawa Chhiring Sherpa. This is the first story in a series in which Manaslu will show exactly why they call it the Killer Mountain. The camp sits on a moraine platform at about 4,800 meters, a rocky pocket at the foot of the mountain, packed tight with tents. This is the most overloaded autumn season in Manaslu's history. Dozens of teams, hundreds of clients, and even more Sherpas. Some are eating breakfast, others are sleeping after a night shift. From the slopes above comes a low, growing rumble. Experienced climbers recognize that sound instantly. A few seconds later, an avalanche front bursts out of the fog and crashes into the camp. A heavy mass of snow with an air blast in front. The blast hits first, tearing tents apart at the walls, ripping out the guy lines. The snow follows. According to Outside Magazine and the Explorers web portal, around 35 tents are damaged or destroyed. Some are buried under a layer of snow. Others are torn like paper. People only have time to cover their heads with their hands. When the cloud settles, the main fact becomes clear. No one is killed at base camp. There are injuries, but no critical cases. People immediately call it a miracle. Footage of the avalanche hits social media within hours and travels around the world in a day. Experienced expedition leaders look at that footage and understand one thing. If an avalanche of that size reached base camp and left no fatalities, this is not the mountain getting lucky. This is a warning, and the mountain is not done for the day. To understand how people react that morning, you have to go back a week, to the 26th of September, 2022. That day, another avalanche releases on the upper sections of the route. It hits high up, around 7,300 meters, the most dangerous spot on the whole climb. The first victim is Nepali guide Anup. He is moving with clients toward Camp 4, and the avalanche catches him right on the trail. His body is recovered quickly. That same day, on a different section of the mountain, Hilaree Nelson dies, an American ski mountaineer with a worldwide reputation. She climbs to the summit of Manaslu and begins her ski descent. Somewhere on the ridge below the true summit, she slips off the slope and disappears from view. Her body will be found on the glacier 2 days later. For the international climbing press, it is a shock. 1 day, 2 dead, more than 10 injured. By every standard in the climbing industry, after an event like that, the season should be stopped, at least for a snow stability assessment. But in the autumn of 2022, a record number of permits has been issued for Manaslu, and behind every permit is a large deposit. The teams do not leave. They keep going up, keep fixing ropes, keep preparing for a summit window. By the morning of October 1st, the climbing world is already stretched to the limit. And then the avalanche hits base camp. Now, about the mountain itself. Without it, the rest of the story does not hold together. Manaslu is the 8th highest peak in the world, 8,163 meters. It stands in Nepal, in the Gorkha district, hidden by neighboring ridges from the main tourist trails. The name comes from the Sanskrit manasa, meaning soul or mind. In climbing literature, the translation that stuck is Mountain of the Spirit, but among high-altitude climbers, it has a second name, Killer Mountain. It earned that nickname after the disaster on the 10th of April, 1972, when 15 people died on its slopes in a single event. The first ascent was on the 9th of May, 1956, a Japanese expedition, Toshio Imanishi and Sherpa Gyaltsen Norbu. Since then, Manaslu has been the Japanese mountain. Manaslu's main danger is not the technical difficulty. The standard route on the northeast face is considered one of the easier 8,000ers. The danger is the seracs, the giant hanging towers of ice, and the avalanches off the massive snow plateaus at around 7,000 meters. When a thick layer of fresh snow settles up there, those plateaus turn into loaded chambers. The route is standard, base camp at 4,800, Camp 1 at about 5,700, Camp 2 at 6,300, Camp 3 and Camp 4 higher up, and then the summit. In the 2000s, when Cho Oyu was effectively closed from the Tibetan side, Manaslu became its main alternative on the market. Clients started pouring in, chasing the dream of an easy 8,000er. But the mountain's fatality rate is around 10%, one of the worst of any 8,000er on the planet. On that record morning in 2022, there is a man working on the slope whose name means almost nothing to the general public. But within the Nepali high-altitude community, that name is a mark of quality. Dawa Chhiring Sherpa, a high-altitude guide. A man who has spent more time on 8,000ers than most amateur climbers spend in the mountains, period. By the autumn of 2022, his record looks like this: 5 summits of Manaslu, 6 summits of Everest, 2 ascents of Cho Oyu, 1 of Shishapangma. A top-tier 8,000er professional, his employer is 7 Summit Treks, one of the largest expedition companies in Nepal. For the autumn season of 2022, Dawa is part of a joint team formed by 7 Summit Treks and Arnold Koster Expeditions. Arnold Koster is a Dutch expedition leader with decades of experience in the Himalayas. He will later speak publicly about exactly how it happened. Dawa's role is the standard one for a lead Sherpa. Break trail where the snow is deep. Fix the rope lines. Go first through the uncertain ground. It is hard, dangerous, badly paid work, and it is what holds the entire high-altitude climbing industry in the Himalayas together. Among Sherpas, Dawa Chhiring is a known figure. Climbers from neighboring teams come to him for advice. His close friends on the mountain are Gelje Sherpa and Gesman Tamang, also experienced high-altitude guides. By the time the avalanche hits base camp, his team is not down below. It is higher on the mountain. According to Arnold Koster, that morning, the joint group from 7 Summit Treks and Arnold Koster Expeditions is descending from the upper camps, through Camp 2 and down toward Camp 1. Conditions are bad. Through August and September, an abnormal amount of snow has fallen on the mountain. It has not had time to settle, and under the top layer, there are pockets of loose material. Any slope steeper than 30 degrees becomes a potential avalanche slab. On the stretch between Camp 2 and Camp 1, halfway through the descent, there is a section where someone has to break trail. Fresh snow has buried the old track. Someone has to go in front and punch a path for the others. Dawa Chhiring goes first. The natural role for the most experienced man on the rope. Right behind him are the clients. On the same fixed line, in a neighboring rope group, are several Sherpas from another expedition. Word about the base camp avalanche has already come through on the radio. The decision has already been made. Go down. An avalanche below does not make descending more dangerous than staying up. The group moves exactly along the fixed lines, carabiners clipped in. Standard protocol for a guided expedition. The time is around 11 in the morning. A few hours after the strike on base camp, the scenario repeats. Only this time, higher up the slope. The snow plateaus above the route, loaded with 2 weeks of fresh snowfall, reach the point of release. Somewhere above the Koster group, the fracture begins. A narrow crack in the slab. A second later, a wide slab tears free. 2 seconds after that, hundreds of tons of snow are moving on their own. It hits exactly the section where Dawa is leading his team down. The impact comes with no warning, no crack, no audible release, no visible fractures on the surface. When the cloud settles, the group on the rope starts checking themselves. The 2 Sherpas in the neighboring rope team, the ones who were right behind Dawa, are found still clipped to the fixed line, bruises and contusions. But they are alive. Their safety carabiners held. Dawa Chhiring is not on the rope. The carabiner the fixed line ran through is still there. The man next to it is gone. What happened between Dawa and his safety, no one knows for certain. 2 scenarios are possible. Either the avalanche tore him away before the safety could take the load. The jolt was so violent that the carabiner opened or the rope broke. Or, at the moment of impact, Dawa was not yet clipped into the upper section of the line because he was going first, breaking trail, and could have been in a gap where he was setting his own anchors. A short command goes out over the radio. The group freezes. The news travels down fast. Within minutes, base camp already knows. The Koster group has been hit. 1 man is missing. The name is Dawa Chhiring. Two men react to that news instantly, Gelje Sherpa and Gesman Tamang. Both close friends of Dawa, both high-altitude guides with long records of their own. They do not wait for a helicopter. They do not wait for instructions from team leaders. They head out onto the slope on foot, straight toward the avalanche debris. A helicopter is not much use in a situation like this. The terrain on that section is broken, the visibility is unstable, and the avalanche risk stays high for many more hours. Any attempt to hover could trigger the next release. The friends are not searching just anywhere. They search with intent. The deep folds of the slope, the edges of the crevasses. Any climber who has worked on avalanche terrain knows. A body caught in a large flow is almost always carried down to the lowest point of the terrain. The body of Dawa Chhiring Sherpa is found in a crevasse. The avalanche carried him to the edge of an ice break and dropped him in. The same men who search for him carry out the evacuation. No loud statements, no journalists on the slope. For the Nepali climbing community, the loss is a blow. The man they have lost is not a client. He is one of theirs, a name known across dozens of expeditions. Dawa's family will hear the details later, once the first wave of news has rolled through social media and reached their village. When the news is confirmed, international climbing press reacts within hours. The first to publicly say what many were thinking is Lucas Furtenbach, the director of the Austrian company Furtenbach Adventures. His team is also working on Manaslu that season. His statement is quoted across all the major outlets. Heavy snowfall and no real work on avalanche risk. The same thing that happened in 2012. And then. It does not matter whether there are 200 permits or 400. If conditions are dangerous, you are obligated to stop. That reference to 2012 hits a nerve. 10 years earlier, on the same Manaslu, one of the worst events of the decade had taken place. An event we will come back to separately in this series. What matters here is one thing. Furtenbach is saying that, in 2022, the same systemic mistake repeated itself. His argument is simple and uncomfortable. The mountain had already proven that season that it was ready to release. On the 26th of September, it took 2 lives. After that, a lot of teams should have asked themselves a question. Is it safe to keep going? But the financial pressure outweighed common sense. And by the morning of October 1st, the mountain had taken another man. Furtenbach is not pointing the finger at any specific Sherpa or any one operator. He is pointing at the entire commercial system on Manaslu in 2022, a system that, in the middle of record demand, had forgotten how to tell clients no. October first becomes the point of no return for the entire autumn season. By evening at base camp, a mass shutdown begins. One team after another reaches the same decision: pack up, take down the tents, load the gear, descend to Samagaon, and from there by helicopter or on foot back to Kathmandu. The teams who had been planning to wait out another summit window the following week pull the plug right there. Officials at Nepal's Department of Tourism will later confirm it. Almost every expedition on Manaslu was ended ahead of schedule, a rare admission from the Nepali authorities, who usually have a strong incentive to preserve the image of the autumn season. But this time, the scale of events leaves no room to maneuver. The last recorded summits of the 2022 season will be logged on October 4th. A handful of teams managed to push to the top in a brief weather window. After that, nothing happens on the mountain for months. The summary of one short stretch from the 26th of September to the 1st of October. 6 days, 3 dead, Anup Rai, Hilaree Nelson, Dawa Chhiring Sherpa. About 13 injured. The most loaded autumn season in Manaslu's history becomes one of its most damaged. In the news, his name appears third on the list of the dead. But for most viewers around the world, it remains a name they have never heard. He is a worker on the 8000ers, a background figure in a commercial industry. For Manaslu itself, 2022 confirms the old nickname. Killer Mountain is dangerous not because of technical difficulty and not because of altitude. It is dangerous because its slopes know how to slide. This story is the most recent point on a long timeline. From here, we go backwards in time, to the 2 who died 5 days before Dawa, and deeper still, to the disasters that gave Manaslu its name. September 26, 2022, 10:42 in the morning, local time. Mount Manaslu, the true summit, 8,163 meters. two people stand on a narrow snow point. Hilaree Nelson, captain of the North Face team, and her partner, Jim Morrison. They have been climbing here for weeks. In a couple of minutes, they will clip into their skis and begin the descent the whole expedition was built around. A few turns in, one of the two figures slips off the ridge into the South Couloir, falling nearly 2,000 meters down. This is the story of a woman who was called the face of her generation. Hilaree Nelson was born in 1972 in Seattle, the Pacific Northwest, half a year of rain, the Cascade Mountains on the horizon. Her parents put her on skis at 3, not for weekend fun, but to teach her to stand on snow before she could read fluently. Every weekend, the family drove out to Stevens Pass. Her older brothers dragged her onto runs harder than their own, and by high school, she was already confidently riding the Black Diamonds. Next came Colorado College, but Colorado was a way station for her. Right after college, Hilaree moved to France, to Chamonix. There, in the Alpine capital, she picked up an ice axe and clipped on crampons for the first time. The resort skier turned into a technical alpinist, for whom climbing up and skiing down were one single motion. In 1999, back in the States, her name appeared on the North Face payroll. The contract turned a passion into a profession. Her signature move, climb a mountain and ski back down it. On skis from peaks, no one usually even tries to ski from the top. Her early years brought Alaska, Antarctica, the Andes, the Tian Shan. Over her career, more than 40 expeditions across 16 countries and dozens of first descents, runs no skier had ever done before her. By the 2010s, she was being called the most prolific female ski mountaineer of her generation. She had a completely different life, too. From her marriage to Brian O'Neill came 2 sons, Graydon and Quinn. Hilaree spoke about this plainly. Motherhood and expeditions were not an either-or for her, but 2 halves of one life. One season, a tent at 7,000 meters, the next, the boys' school calendar, and then back to a mountain. On May 25, 2012, Hilaree did what no woman had done before her. The idea was this: take 2 8,000ers back to back, with no descent in between. First Everest, 8,848. Then back to the South Col, a few hours of rest, oxygen, food, water. And out the same day onto the neighboring mountain, Lhotse, 8,516. For women's mountaineering, it was the record of the era. The numbers were discussed in every article about the Himalayas that season. Outside put her on the cover. National Geographic ran a major feature. After that May, her name stepped out of a narrow circle and entered the wider conversation about mountains. The press immediately stuck a label on her, the face of women's mountaineering for the next decade. Hilaree brushed it off but didn't argue. She was simply planning the next climb. An idea was already taking shape, a ski descent from something no one had ever skied. A few years later, Jim Morrison appeared in her life, a pilot, a skier, a climber, just as obsessed with mountains as she was. In 2017, the two of them skied down the 8,000er Makalu. Their partnership quickly became both athletic and personal. A year after that came their main joint project. On September 30th, 2018, Hilaree and Jim Morrison became the first in history to ski from the very summit of Lhotse down a narrow ice couloir. The descent is called the Dream Line, a chute as wide as a passenger car, squeezed between vertical walls. Climbers had stared at it for decades and not dared. The pair worked their way down it carefully, meter by meter. After the Dream Line, everything that exists in her trade rained down on Hilaree. National Geographic named her Adventurer of the Year. The North Face appointed her captain of its athlete team. Before her, only one person had held that post, Conrad Anker. Her captaincy meant that women's ski mountaineering had finally taken its place alongside the men's. 4 years went by. By the autumn of 2022, Hilaree had 11 8,000ers behind her and a plan for the 12th. Manaslu. No one had ever skied from the true summit. From the foresummit, a little lower, there had been descents, but the highest point was a narrow snow fang where one person could fit, and you had to walk a knife-edge ridge to reach it. Many climbers turned back earlier, counting the foresummit as the real one. Hilaree and Jim wanted to go all the way to the true point and do it as a pair. For the North Face, it was another achievement by their captain. For Hilaree herself, it was the same line that had run through Everest, Makalu, and Lhotse. She had a hard rule on this. If you ski from the highest point, that is a descent of the mountain. If it is not the highest point, it is only half the job. Manaslu is not known for the difficulty of its route. Its main dangers are the moods of the snow and the seracs. Snow was what Hilaree had the most questions about before the push. The 2022 season on the mountain was unusually wet, and she knew it. The pair spent the night of September 25th to 26th in the high camp, above 7,000 meters. Then they set out in the dark along a familiar route. The wind hit them in the face. Hilaree and Jim were not alone. A team of support Sherpas with ropes and oxygen was nearby. With the first light, they reached the final ridge. About an hour along the knife edge to the true summit, they passed the foresummit and kept going. At the true top of Manaslu, Hilaree Nelson and Jim Morrison stood at 10:42 local time, 8,163 meters. At the top, everything was exactly as they had dreamed. Visibility was good, the wind moderate, the lower snow seemed to be holding. The pair took off their packs, pulled out their skis, and clipped in right there on the ridge. Their plan was simple. Drop down from the summit on the south side, ease around the corner in soft arcs, and link up with the Sherpas on a wide shelf about 200 meters below. From there, the long familiar route back to the high camp. Jim Morrison pushed off first, a few turns in the upper snow to feel how it held, and he stopped lower to wait for Hilaree. From where he stood, he could see the narrow entry to the chute and the ridge overhead. Hilaree started behind him. The first turns were on the steep section right under the true summit, and there, something went wrong. Later, in a short interview, Jim would put it into one sentence. Her ski cut a snow slab, and a small avalanche slid out from under her. The slab carried her off the ridge. There is no footage of what came next. No one filmed it. Hilaree did not manage to stop, and not toward the side they had climbed up, but the opposite one, the south. The south face of Manaslu drops away in a narrow couloir for nearly 2 kilometers, toward the east wall. Everything went with her. Skis, rope, oxygen bottle. Jim Morrison stayed where he was, waiting. 1 minute, 2, 3. Hilaree did not appear from behind the ridge. From below, from the Sherpas on the shelf, no one could see her either. Jim took the radio and called base camp. His voice was level, no panic. A small avalanche. Hilaree was taken to the south side. She's not in sight. Within a few minutes, the entire Manaslu season knew. The news passed down the chain to the military. By midday, the Nepalese army helicopters were involved. They came in from Kathmandu along the south side of the massif. The first flyover came back empty. By the evening of September 26th, it was clear. No one would reach that face today. The snow was unstable, the wind at the summit too strong to hover in, the weather collapsing by the hour. On September 27th, the searchers made several passes along the south and east walls. From the air, a human body on snow is a dark dot the size of a letter on a page. Visibility was patchy. The slopes had been swept over with fresh snow overnight. They could not find her. The helicopters returned to Kathmandu empty. By that point, Jim had already come down to base camp and would not leave the communications tent. He sat and waited for the next morning. Almost a full day had passed since Hilaree was swept away. No signal, no body. By the morning of September 28th, the weather settled a little. The cloud ceiling lifted above 8,000. The wind at the summit dropped to something bearable. A helicopter went out again to the south side. On board were the pilot, rescuers, and Jim Morrison. Above the Tulagi Glacier, at the very foot of the east wall, the pilot spotted a dark patch on the snow, the size of a person. The machine made one circle, then a second. It was Hilaree. The find was about 1,900 meters below the true summit, almost 2 kilometers of vertical from the point where they had stood on the ridge 2 days earlier. What happened was reconstructed afterwards, from the tracks in the snow and the nature of the slide. After being knocked off, Hilaree was carried down the couloir for nearly the entire face, until she was pushed out onto a gentler glacier. She only stopped here, on the Tulagi. The helicopter landed beside her. Jim got out first. Her body was placed in a net and lifted on board. The same day she was flown to Kathmandu, to the hospital morgue. On Manaslu, that same morning, another body remained. The Nepalese guide Anup, who died on the same day on the same mountain. But that is a separate conversation. On October 2nd, 2022, Hilaree's body was driven from the hospital morgue on an open truck. The vehicle was draped in flower garlands and her portrait. Swayambhunath was chosen for the farewell, an ancient Buddhist complex in Kathmandu, known the world over as the Monkey Temple. At the Sherpa cremation grounds, family, friends, climbers, officials, and monks gathered. People came up and laid down white kata scarves and mountain flowers. By Buddhist tradition, the body was sent off with prayers and music. Jim Morrison stood beside her to the end. He said almost nothing. After the farewell, he said one thing. He would take the ashes back to the States, to where Graydon and Quinn were. Swayambhunath, for the family, was a mark of respect to Nepal and to the mountains, to which Hilaree had given more than 20 years. For the North Face, her death meant the loss of the captain of the athlete team. For the world of women's mountaineering, the loss of one of the defining names of the decade. Outside, National Geographic, CBS, ABC, The Guardian, French and Japanese publications all ran major pieces. The documentaries she had been in went out with her name in the dedication. On the mountain itself, nothing was over yet. 5 days later, that same Manaslu would be hit by an avalanche at base camp and take the Sherpa Dawa Chhiring, a story viewers have already heard. In just a couple of autumn weeks of 2022, this mountain put together one of the longest lists of dead in its entire modern record. Hilaree Nelson stands at the top of that list. On the 26th of September, 2022, 2 people die on Manaslu in a single day. On one side of the mountain, an American star of ski mountaineering vanishes, and the whole world writes about it. On the other side, at 7,300 meters, a slab of snow traps a 34-year-old Nepali guide who has 2 small children waiting for him in a village back home. His nickname is the Smiling Buddha. His name is Anup Rai. The Western press will give him 2 paragraphs. His village will give him an obituary that actually mattered. This is the story of how a single avalanche writes 2 completely different deaths. If you run your finger across the map of Nepal eastward from Kathmandu, far past the familiar trekking valleys, your hand stops in a district called Sankhua Saba, the Arun River, terraced fields, villages where a person can live an entire life and never once see a foreigner. This is where a boy is born. His name is Anup. His last name is Rai. On Nepali soil, that already says a great deal. The Rai are not Sherpas. They are a separate indigenous people, with their own language, their own cuisine, their own gods. The Sherpas have fame, agencies in Everest. The Rai have land, livestock, and the rare money transfer from Kathmandu. Anup grows up, gets married, has 2 children. The family lives modestly. By the start of 2022, he is 34. He carries not only his wife and children, but almost the entire thread that ties this village to the wider world. The good news in the family in recent years has been the money he sends down from the mountains. Sankhua Saba has never made the news. A few months later, the district will make it onto the wires exactly once. In the West, any Nepali who carries someone else's oxygen above 8,000 meters is reflexively called a Sherpa. In a news story, the word is convenient, but it is not accurate. The Sherpas are a separate people from the Solukhumbu region at the foot of Everest. They have their own bond with the great mountains, their own dynasties of guides, family names that read inside the industry like a passport. Anup has no such surname. He has Rai, and that means he enters big mountaineering from the bottom, without a dynasty. The road is the same for everyone. First a porter in trekking groups, mattresses, gas cylinders, food on his back from village to village. Then a porter at the base camp of an expedition. Then loads a little higher, to Camp 1, to Camp 2. Whoever holds up to the altitude and can work with rope climbs further. Some break, some stay in the middle for years. Anup walks the full ladder. By 2022, he has been on 8,000ers many times, Manaslu among them. A face other guides on the route recognize at once. Hands that know the real work, fixing rope above Camp 3. At altitudes where the Western client can no longer think about anything except his own lungs. People who work long on the 8,000ers are recognized in the community by small details. The way someone speaks, the way someone ties a knot, the way someone eats at altitude. Anup has his own detail, the smile, A nickname stuck to him, Smiling Buddha. Not pompous, not ceremonial, more like warm. The kind of nickname that is born inside a tent after 12 hours on the rope. Foreign climbers who roped up next to him all say the same thing. -20, wind, a heavy pack, a queue under the fixed lines, and his face is calm and smiling. In photographs, he is always recognized in the same way. Even under an oxygen mask, the smile is visible through the eyes. A few months from now, that single line about the smile will be the only human detail Western media will manage to record about him. The rest will be his age, the district of his birth, the name of his employer, and the word Sherpa used in a broad sense. The autumn season of 2022 becomes the most crowded in Manaslu's entire history. The Nepali Ministry of Tourism issues a record number of permits. The base camp grows so large that narrow paths have to be cut between the tents. On a single route, the clients of several major operators work side by side. 7 summit treks, Imagine Nepal, Elite Expedition, 8K Expeditions, Satori Adventures. This season, Anup is working for a Nepali company, Satori Adventures. His place is in front of the client rope team. A high-altitude guide does not walk in the back. He walks first across an unfixed slope, sets the anchors, pulls the rope up, checks whether the snow holds under his feet. The most dangerous job on the route. The man who goes first checks the slope with his own body. September brings weather to the upper slopes that no one expected. Snow falls without stopping for 15 days in a row. Dense, dry snow that has no time to settle and piles up layer on layer. On the section between Camp 3 at roughly 6,800 meters and Camp 4 at 7,500, 1.5 meters to 2 meters of fresh cover builds up in 2 weeks. The icefall specialist Yukta Gurung will later tell the Nepali press a single sentence. The slope was overloaded and was bound to go. The foreign clients sit in base camp and wait for a weather window. The high-altitude guides have a different schedule. They go higher. They need to fix the route and stage loads before the main wave of clients arrives. They work on an overloaded slope in poor visibility. On the night of the 26th of September, Anup leaves Camp 3 with a group of colleagues, a mixed company, guides and porters from various operators, around 10 people. Each man carries a load and a section of fixed rope. The rope teams stretch up the slope in a tight order. A narrow trail, packed down over the previous days, leads to the ridge. The snow underfoot is heavy, puffy on top, cemented below. It is awkward to walk, but it can be done. Anup is among those in front. He is in the upper part of the group, closer to the point where the slope rolls out onto a more open section. At roughly 7,300 meters, the dawn catches up with him. On the same morning, on the opposite side of the mountain, an American skier is already standing at the true summit. She is preparing to ski from the actual top all the way down to base camp. A different team, a different route, a different side. She and Anup will never cross paths. By 10 o'clock, the dawn dissolves into a dense gray light. There is almost no visibility. The high-altitude guide at the head of the rope team hears the sound no one ever wants to hear. Around 11:30 local time, above the group, a snow slab releases. Not an avalanche of light powder rolling down in a soft foam. A slab of compacted snow, 1 meter thick, tens of meters wide. It breaks away from the underlying layer in one motion, the way a tile peels off a wall. The route runs underneath, and underneath, there are about 13 people from different teams. The impact at the release point is the most powerful. Here, the mass of snow still moves slowly but densely, and it drags down everything in its path. Lower down the speed climbs, and the flow accelerates to tens of meters per second across a wide funnel. Anup is in the very top part of the group, right where the slab breaks. He and several men beside him are torn off the slope and dragged down, first across the open field, then into the lower gully below the route. Those who walked at the rear manage to see the front part of the rope team disappear into a white cloud. They themselves are clipped only by the edge of the runout. By the evening of the 26th of September, a count goes back and forth on the radio between the camps. 12 people have been pulled out alive. Many have fractures, frostbite, concussions. They are lowered down the fixed lines, sometimes dragged on sleeping bags, to Camp 2 and below, to base camp. One man does not respond on the radio. That man is Anup Rai. He is found the same day. The body lies close to the route, in the lower part of the avalanche runout, not buried deep on the surface. Those working on the slope nearby reach him and confirm he is dead. In the same moment, on the other side of the mountain, a completely different story is unfolding. There they have already been searching for the American woman for hours. She was swept off another part of the slope, almost 2 kilometers into the southern couloir, and she vanished from sight immediately. They will search for her for many more days, and the body will be found far later than that evening. With Anup's body, it goes differently. They managed to bring him out fast. That will become a key difference between the 2 obituaries the world writes over the next 24 hours. Taking a body down from the upper slopes is a separate job of many hours. He is wrapped up, pulled off the avalanche debris, and hauled down the fixed lines, across the glacier, to base camp. Part of the way carried by hand, part of the way dragged across crevasses. Among those helping with the evacuation is a Brazilian photographer, Gabriel Tarso. He happened to be on the route with a team, and within a few days his photographs will run across Western publications as the first images of the aftermath of the slide. By evening, the body is brought to the village of Samagaon, at the foot of the mountain, the nearest valley to base camp. A helicopter is waiting there. On the 27th of September, a chopper picks Anup up in Samagaon and flies him to Kathmandu. At the airport, he is met by colleagues from Satori Adventures and guides from other companies, men who worked with him this season and in previous ones. On the southern couloir, at the same hours, the search is now in its second day. The world is discussing her story without a pause. Anup's death fits into the international press in 2 or 3 paragraphs. Outside Online runs a piece under the headline, "Avalanches Kill Another Climber on Manaslu." The word another here is the most precise and the heaviest at once. For the general reader, he really is just another one, without a name, without a face, without a biography. Inside the text, there is his age, the district of his birth, that same word Sherpa in quotation marks, and the nickname. That is where the Western press stops. Inside Nepal, the picture is different. The mountaineering community knows him by sight. Local newspapers run full features. The headlines use that same nickname, and it becomes the main line by which he is remembered. Foreigners who had worked with Anup before organize a fundraiser for his wife and 2 children. The money is collected through private channels, through chains of acquaintances, through colleagues in different countries. Several $1,000s find their way down into the valley. The funeral takes place where he grew up. Sankhua Sabha is saying goodbye to its most famous man, the only one whose name in those days is heard outside the district. The mountain, meanwhile, carries on with its season. By the end of September, the season is already broken, but not yet closed. Some clients have gone down and are waiting for a second attempt. Some are packing up, some are still hoping for another weather window. 5 days after the 26th, the same mountain will take another Nepali climber. The viewer has already seen that story in the first episode of this collection, so a single line is enough. On the 1st of October, a massive avalanche will sweep across base camp, flatten dozens of tents, and the season will be shut down for good. In that autumn chain of events, his name will sound the quietest of all. Hilaree Nelson will be seen by the entire world. The strike on base camp will become a subject of safety reports for years to come. About the high-altitude guide from Sankhua Sabha, only one thing will remain: a short column in Outside Online and a nickname in a few Nepali papers. In his own valley, that is still the loudest name that has ever sounded there. Every house remembers that Sankhua Sabha once had its own smiling Buddha, and that he went off to work and never came back. September 28, 2021. A Canadian, Brent, 37 years old, is making his way along the upper section of Manaslu. A short pause. He eats, drinks, says something to his guide. A minute later, he drops onto the snow and stops responding. There was no slip, no falling rock, no avalanche. His heart simply stops. By this moment, he is one of the most recognizable people in Canada speaking openly about schizophrenia. And exactly 1 year later, Manaslu will take 3 more lives in a single week. The story of Brent Seal is the quiet prologue to a much larger disaster. Langley, a suburb of Greater Vancouver. Quiet streets, middle class, no climbing tradition in the family, no climbing fathers, no Himalayan tales at the dinner table. Brent grows up as an ordinary Canadian kid, athletic, and so far not really thinking about big mountains at all. That thought will come later, and under strange circumstances. The year is 2007. Brent is studying at Simon Fraser University in the business faculty. He is 23. Lecture halls, exams, friends, plans after graduation, everything just like everyone else. And then, inside this perfectly ordinary picture, something begins that psychiatrists will later call an acute psychotic episode. The brain refuses to work the way it did before. One crisis episode ends in emergency hospitalization. After the hospitalization, doctors give him a diagnosis, schizophrenia. To a young man from a quiet suburb, it sounds like a life sentence. Then begins what Brent will later call his recovery. Not one tool, but several at once. A psychiatrist and regular appointments, medication, sleep, diet, social connections that he himself builds on campus. And, this will turn out to matter, long physical workouts. At first, just running. Then, ultramarathons, 40 to 50 kilometers at a stretch. The body becomes the instrument that helps hold the mind together. In 2008, he founds a group on the SFU campus called Students for Mental Wellness. It is his first public initiative, a place where students with similar diagnoses can choose not to stay silent. 3 years later, he graduates from the university as the top student of his class, with a business degree and 5 years of living with the diagnosis behind him. By graduation, he has a personal rule that will later turn up in his lectures. The mountain outside helps you handle the mountain inside. On that sentence, he will build the next 13 years. After graduation, Brent opens his own organization in Vancouver, Mavericks. It is not a climbing club. It is a social enterprise, training and lectures for students and young professionals about how to hold on to your mental health. Mavericks works with universities, corporate HR departments, schools. Brent speaks on stage, on podcasts, on CBC broadcasts. The subject is always the same, the stigma around mental health diagnoses and how to dismantle it. In parallel, another project appears, the one that will make him recognizable. Brent makes a deal with documentary filmmaker James Frystock. They launch Mind Use Mountain, a web series about the parallel between climbing a mountain and finding your way out of a mental health crisis. The idea is simple. Show one man with a diagnosis who steadily takes on big summits and speaks about it on camera. The plan stretches across 3 years, Aconcagua, Denali, and at the finale, Everest. He takes Aconcagua in 2016, almost 7,000 meters, the highest point of South America. By his own statement, he is the first person with a diagnosis of schizophrenia to reach this summit. That same year, 2016, he climbs Denali, 6,190 meters, the highest point of North America. With Everest in 2017, things do not unfold the way they were planned. The information about that attempt is contradictory. There is no confirmed summit. Brent does not give up. He keeps training. In 2019, he climbs Pico de Orizaba in Mexico, 5,636 meters. It is part of the preparation for the next altitudes. By the age of 37, he has roughly 10 years of public work on mental health behind him, and several serious high-altitude climbs. In every interview, the same line comes back. I am doing this to show that mental illness is no longer a life sentence. In the spring of 2021, he names his next goal, Manaslu, his first 8,000er. After Aconcagua and Denali, the choice makes sense. Just over 8,000 meters, the classic September season. A technically tolerable route. He prepares in public. He films short videos, trail runs in British Columbia, weighted ascents, acclimatization trips into the Rocky Mountains. On the Mavericks page, there are posts about how his training routine is shifting. In conversations with friends, he calls this climb his personal summit, the stage that is meant to close a long arc of work. The permit is arranged through a Nepali operator, Tag Nepal, a small company with no high-profile media guides on its roster. Brent enters the mountain with minimal support, without the large commercial Sherpa setup that most clients of the season rely on. One guide during the summit push, no media trail, no sponsor pressure. The autumn season of 2021 on Manaslu is busy. Around 170 permits, more than 100 people will reach the summit within the short September window. European commercial groups, Indian couples, Japanese climbers, and inside this flow, a Canadian who walks with a single guide and speaks publicly about schizophrenia. In base camp, he is calm. The expedition team will later say of him, one of the most prepared, modest, and pleasant participants in the entire history of our climbs. On the radio, his voice sounds confident. A day before the push, the weather turns. Some groups slow down and wait it out in the lower camps. Brent stays on schedule. On September 27, 2021, he leaves the 4th high camp at an altitude of about 7,400 meters and starts moving toward the summit. The morning of September 28th, a rope team of several people is moving along the upper section of the route. It is cold, the air is thin, the snow under their feet is firm. Brent is moving at his own pace. The guide is beside him. They are already above 7,800. On the details, the sources diverge. Some reports give an altitude of around 7,450. Others say 7,885. Some say the collapse happened on the way up, others on the descent between camps. Most of the early Nepali reports agree on one thing: the morning of the 28th, the upper zone, around 8,000. The group stops for a short rest. Brent has a snack, drinks from his thermos, exchanges a couple of words with his guide. According to the guide, he looked fine. No visible sign of what would happen a minute later. Then, the collapse. No slip, no rock, no avalanche. Brent sinks into the snow and does not move again. The guide drops down beside him, shouts his name. There is no answer. Climbers from a nearby section come over. On the route, CPR begins. At over 7,000 meters, every movement costs double, and chest compressions demand a rhythm that physically does not exist up there. They keep going. 15 minutes, then 20. There is no pulse. A message goes out on the radio to base camp, and from there the response comes back. Continuing the resuscitation no longer makes any sense. The guide decides to stop. The expedition's initial assessment is a sudden cardiac arrest. Other reports point to a stroke. The exact cause, without an autopsy back in Canada, has never been confirmed. 37 years old, 14 years of living with the diagnosis, his own business, lectures, and audiences of thousands of people, a long list of mountain summits. The mountain cuts all of it short in a single minute, without warning. The spot where he is left turns out to be, by Himalayan standards, reasonably accessible. Not a wall, not a crevasse, not a serac zone. The team contacts base camp and begins lowering the body toward the 4th high camp. From there, on September 29, 2021, a helicopter carries him to Kathmandu. That same day, the notification reaches Langley. On September 30th, the first reports appear in the Canadian media. CBC, Gripped, Vancouver Sun, Daily Hive. Not short news items, but long pieces, with the story of his schizophrenia, photos from his lectures, quotes from old interviews. The psychiatric community in British Columbia responds separately. For many of them, Brent was the face of the subject. In the international press, the picture is different. A short note from Sinhwa, a brief summary in the Himalayan Times, a paragraph in Indonesian and Filipino feeds. First death of the season on Manaslu. Canadian climber, 37 years old. No portraits, no spreads. Brent was not the kind of celebrity to whom whole pages are devoted. Mavericks publishes a farewell. The partners from Mine Vives Mountain record video tributes. One phrasing settles into the Canadian coverage. Brent Seal, the first Canadian citizen to die on Manaslu. On the mountain, the season goes on. Before the end of September, dozens more people will still make it to the summit. And the season closes with a number that in that moment looks almost reassuring. More than 100 summits, 1 death. Manaslu looks almost tame. The next autumn, this same mountain will turn September into a catastrophe. 3 dead in a week, dozens injured, base camp under an avalanche. The season closed early. Brent will not see any of it. His cardiac arrest at over 7,000 meters remains in the chronicles of Manaslu as a quiet note in the margin. Not an avalanche, not a rock, not a mistake. Just a mountain that sometimes takes you in silence. A London dressmaker who once stitched gowns for an Oscar-winning film dies in a tent at 6,800 meters. No avalanche, no fall. On the 28th of September, 2019, the Polish climber Rita Bladyko, pushes above Camp 4 on Manaslu. She begins the descent on her own, but others will finish it for her. And then another question. Why does the second Polish woman, having just reached the summit without oxygen, turn her own descent around to help? And why does even that help change nothing? Rita came to the mountains at 44. In 6 years she had reached an 8,000er. They carried her back by helicopter. Rita Donata Bladyko was born in the small Polish town of Kozuchów, not far from Zielona Góra. By the age of 50, her life splits into two halves that barely overlap. The first is London, where she has been living for 14 years, and the sewing workshop, where stage gowns of the highest class come out of her hands. Among her clients, Polish newspapers name Kate Middleton and the singer Adele. Her name stands on the credits of the team that made the costumes for the 2012 film Anna Karenina. The picture wins the Oscar precisely for its costumes. For her relatives back in Poland, this is a reason for pride. A girl from provincial Kozuchów dressing a Hollywood set. The second half is the mountains. She comes to them late. First she takes up skis in the Alps. Then she trades descents for ascents. Those close to her never fully understand how a woman who earns her living with needle and silk spends her free weeks hauling a backpack with crampons. But by 50 she already has her own climbing schedule, her own boots, her own strict acclimatization routine, and a quiet decision to try an 8,000er. From there, the amateur route, step by step, turns into a serious high-altitude career. Her first real summit is Mont Blanc, the highest point of the Alps, 4,810 meters. Then Kilimanjaro, the African ceiling at 5,895, accessible to commercial groups but demanding endurance. Then Elbrus, 5,642, a Caucasian proving ground for high altitudes. And finally, Lenin Peak in Tajikistan, 7,134. This Pamir 7,000er is her first serious test of oxygen starvation. It is there that she first learns what a long night in a tent at 7,000 really means, when the head can no longer tell whether it is sleeping or just has its eyes closed. Between Himalayan seasons, Rita trains in the Tatras in the winter Alps, walks with Polish clubs on difficult routes. The London workshop runs on a trimmed schedule. 2 or 3 expeditions a year leave her clients only short windows. The 8,000er remains the last frontier, one she prepares for deliberately, without rush, without loud announcements on social media. In the autumn of 2019, Rita joins a Polish commercial expedition to Manaslu. The team is small, 5 people, all from Poland. The leader is Zbigniew Bach, an experienced climber and the founder of the club Homo Hibernatus. Bach has long been taking fellow Poles up the 8,000ers. He has a reputation as a leader who does not rush the group and does not look away from the symptoms of altitude sickness. Polish high-altitude climbing carries a long pedigree behind it. Winter pioneers of the Himalayas, the name of Wanda Rutkiewicz, a school to which Rita counts herself as a student, not a star. She goes as a client participant, not as a professional. This is her first attempt at an 8,000er, and she does not hide that she has been preparing for it a long time. Base camp, acclimatization rotations, the usual grid of 4 upper camps. Everything is scheduled by the day. The 2019 season on the mountain is quiet so far. The first death of autumn has not yet been recorded. In parallel with her group, another Polish woman is working on the same mountain. Magdalena Gorskowska is going for the summit without oxygen and does not yet suspect that her descent will cross paths with someone else's fate. On the night of the 28th of September, the Polish group leaves Camp 4 for the summit push. The starting altitude is around 7,400 meters. Ahead lies a long snow plateau, a false summit, and beyond it, the true one still has to be reached. The weather is holding, visibility is fine, but the surface temperature is well below -20. Rita is climbing on supplemental oxygen. The pace set by the leader and the Sherpas turns out to be at the edge of what a 50-year-old amateur can sustain. The team quickly stretches out along the route. Some speed up, some fall behind. The radio carries fragments of reports. At about 8,000 meters, Rita finds herself above the last camp. According to rescuers, she does not reach the true summit. Somewhere between the foresummit and the cone itself, she turns around. Turning back on an 8,000er is hard even for someone who has gone through full training. At that altitude, the brain runs in saving mode. Emotions are dulled. Already at the turnaround point, the first signs of hypothermia are visible on her. Slowed movements, gaps and short commands. A slight lag behind her rope partner that within an hour becomes a long distance. The descent from an 8,000er is always more dangerous than the climb. Years of Himalayan statistics show the same thing. Most deaths happen on the way down, when strength has been spent, concentration drifts away, and the body no longer produces enough warmth. Rita develops classic high-altitude hypothermia. The body stops heating itself. The limbs go numb, the strength drains. She is still on her feet, but her speed drops to almost nothing. Her partners try to belay her. Help arrives in fragments. The rope teams are stretched out. Someone is already at Camp 4. Someone is still higher. After a few hours, she is found at around 7,500 meters, between Camps 4 and 3. The disorientation grows. She confuses direction, sits down in the snow, asks for a short rest, which at this altitude turns into a loop with no exit. Every extra half hour without movement takes another chance to survive away. The Sherpas try to get her back on her feet, to keep the rope team moving at pace, but the pace is no longer there. And it is right here that another Polish climber catches up from below, Magdalena Gorskowska. A day before this meeting, on the 27th of September, she had reached the summit without supplemental oxygen. This is her third 8,000er, and she is coming down at her own rhythm, expecting to be at Camp 4 by evening. On the way down, her path converges with the Polish group, and a single glance is enough to see that her fellow countrywoman is in critical condition. The decision is made in minutes. Magdalena stays to help, even though her own reserves after an oxygen-free summit are already running out. High-altitude ethics above 8,000 has one rule everyone knows by heart. You do not walk past someone who is dying if you can still walk yourself. Magdalena films a short video. On the recording, Rita barely reacts to a voice. Her condition is severe. That footage will later become one of the last frames in which she is seen alive. Together with her partners from the Polish group, Magdalena begins the slow descent toward the nearest camp. Every step turns into a conversation, a shout of her name, a request to make one more move, an attempt to hold a fading consciousness in the short stretch between exhaustion and the sleep that at this altitude equals death. In the twilight, the group brings Rita down to Camp 4. Her condition is not improving. In the tent, they wrap her in 2 sleeping bags, give her warm drinks, pack her with chemical heaters. The Sherpas and her expedition partners work in sync, but at this altitude, improvised remedies against hypothermia have little effect. The body barely responds to heat from the outside. It has nothing left to keep its own temperature going on the inside. They decide to take her lower. The air down there is denser, the chances of recovery are higher. By the light of headlamps with short rope belays, with the help of the Sherpas, she is led down toward Camp 3. The descent takes several hours. Every rope length becomes a compromise between speed and the risk of a fall. Lowering too fast is dangerous for Rita herself. Too slow. The cold and exhaustion eat what little time is left. By night, they manage to get her into the tent at Camp 3, surrounded by people doing everything they can. Warm drinks, pulse checks, a voice nearby. But her body temperature keeps falling. Her state does not stabilize. On the 29th of September, around 4 in the morning, in a tent at 6,800 meters, the heart of Rita Donata Bladyko stops. Resuscitation at this level of hypothermia and exhaustion is almost useless, but they try it anyway. Several minutes of chest compressions, attempts to restore breathing. Nothing. By morning, the news of a death at Camp 3 spreads across the mountain. The Poles request a helicopter evacuation, the standard procedure at these altitudes. But in the Manaslu region that day, there is a thick weather front, zero visibility, low cloud lying on the slopes almost down to base camp. The machines only get into the air in the afternoon, and even then with great difficulty, through narrow windows. The body stays for several hours in the tent at Camp 3, watched over by the remaining members of the expedition. Zbigniew Bach contacts the Polish consulate in Kathmandu and informs the family. Through the embassy, the news of the tragedy reaches London, where Rita has left behind a workshop and a circle of regular clients. No avalanche, no fall. She did not survive the mountain for another reason. At that altitude, there was nothing left in her to push back against the cold. A day later, the weather opens a window. A helicopter brings the body down to Samagaon. From there, a vehicle takes it on to Kathmandu. A farewell is held twice. first in Nepal, then in Poland, in her birthplace, in Kozuchev. The local newspapers of Lubush Voivodeship write one simple line about her: a woman for whom the mountains were everything. The Polish community in London raises money for the family and for a small memorial fund. Magdalena Gorskowska will later give a few interviews. Asked whether she considers herself a heroine, she will answer briefly, "I just went where I was needed." She herself will continue her career. K2 attempts at solo ascents, her name in the short list of Polish high-altitude women of the new generation. Her own story will go on along its own track. Manaslu, 2019, will be closed in the official record as an ordinary season with a single death. But it is exactly that death that opens a chain no one knows about yet. 2 years later, the same mountain will take a Canadian to cardiac arrest near Camp 4. And a year after that, 3 people in a single week to an avalanche and seracs. One thing will remain in the records. The first of the autumn 2019 list was Rita. In the climbing community, the analysis of this death is conducted quietly. No avalanche, no fall, no navigation error, no conflict inside the rope team. The kind of fuel that usually feeds hard reports is simply not there. High-altitude exhaustion and hypothermia at 8,000 are not cured by descending in time. At that altitude, this in time often simply does not exist. A late arrival in the mountains, age past 50. A first 8,000 are used as a starting point rather than a culmination. The factors stack one on top of the other. But none of her colleagues call it recklessness. Rita went through every stage of training, climbed under an experienced leader in a tested group. The argument shifts elsewhere, to the limits of commercial expeditions, where the client decides for themselves when to turn back, and where no one has the right to pull them off the route as long as they are still on their feet. By the year 2019, hundreds of clients are already going up Manaslu each season. The mountain is used to taking in amateurs. Rita's story does not make it into the loud headlines. Too quiet an ending, too uncomfortable a moral. Only a tent at 6,800, 4 in the morning, and a woman who could no longer be warmed. October 7th, 2016. A Japanese student, 24 years old, part of an expedition of 6. On the final meters, only 2 remain: Hirotaka Onodera and his university professor, Suguru Takano. The fixed ropes end just below the summit. To the true height of 8,163 meters, there are still 20 steps along a narrow snow cornice. Hirotaka pulls out his smartphone to film his teacher against the sky. The frame is meant to be proof, and in that very second, the cornice under his feet breaks away. There is a single witness, the man he was filming. Hirotaka is 24, from Miyagi Prefecture in northeastern Japan. A coast lined with pine trees, quiet towns, people used to facing the elements head-on. He grew up there, and there he saw mountains for the first time. He went to Tokyo to study. His university in Tokyo is Tokyo Nodai, the Tokyo University of Agriculture. Inside, there is an alpine club with a long history. Japanese student clubs of this kind are a breed of their own. They teach newcomers not heroics, but methodical work, acclimatization, duty rotations, training in the Japanese Alps at home, rope protocols, group conduct. For decades, future high-altitude climbers have come out of clubs like this, and some of them eventually end up on the 8,000ers. In 2016, Hirotaka makes the club's expedition roster. The team is mixed and compact, just 6 people. Most are students like himself. The leader is Professor Suguru Takano, a teacher at the same university. It is a format familiar in Japan: teacher and pupils, shared camp, shared route. The age gap does not erase hierarchy, but it doesn't turn it into a wall either. On the mountain, everyone depends on each other equally. The goal is Manaslu, in the autumn of that same year. For most of the group, this is their first 8,000er. The logistics on the Nepalese side are handled by the Cosmotrek operator in Kathmandu. Permits, porters, supply runs, base camp at the foot of the mountain. The team enters the massif in September, sets up at the base, and begins their own line of work. For the Japanese, Manaslu carries a special weight. Exactly 60 years earlier, in 1956, their countrymen were the first to stand on this very mountain. That ascent is where the tradition begins. That season, the slopes are crowded. The autumn of 2016 turns out to be a record one for Manaslu in terms of clients. Commercial groups move up one after another. The camps are overflowing. Fresh parties keep arriving on the route. The main line of ropes upward is set by the Sherpas of the Nepalese operator 7 Summit Treks. They fix the ropes up to the upper shoulders of the mountain, and most of the clients follow exactly along that line. The Japanese decide differently. They do not hire Sherpas for the upper work and do not plug into the commercial chain. Their version is Alpine style, a small autonomous team, their own gear, their own pace. On an 8,000er during the commercial season, that choice is almost an exception. The route is the East Ridge, the classic northeastern line. Takano's team sets up its own camps, carefully spaces out acclimatization rotations, and does not rush. The professor sets a pace without jolts. The younger climbers stick close behind. Hirotaka is among the strongest of them. By late September, they are ready for the final push. The main weather window of the season falls on September 30th and October 1st. Over those 2 days, about 150 people pass over the top. The Japanese group deliberately goes later. They want the wave to pass, the fixed ropes to clear of people, so they can move and see the terrain under their feet rather than someone else's back. On October 6th, the upper camps become the launch pad. The team of 6 heads out on the summit push by all the rules: early start, minimal load, oxygen bottles for those who plan to use them. Professor Takano's plan is detailed, and he himself moves with focus as the senior member of the group. But an 8,000er has a way of quickly separating those who reach the top from those who turn back. At various marks, 4 members stop. Each has their own reason. One's strength suddenly fails. Another shows signs of altitude sickness. Someone chooses not to take the risk. Turning around at altitude is normal. The mountain punishes stubbornness harder than caution. And that rule has been absorbed by everyone who has come through the university club. Higher up, only 2 remain: the professor and his student. Takano goes in front, Hirotaka follows step by step. They stay above 8,000 meters for several hours at a stretch. Underfoot, a narrow snow ridge. On either side, a gray abyss opens up with clouds drifting slowly through it. There is little air here, and every step has to be measured out. They reach the upper zone in the morning of October 7th. Somewhere ahead is a narrow strip between 2 false summits and the true peak. A particular part of the route, the last fragment, on which the majority of climbers make a mistake. Prayer flags pressed flat by the wind are visible, left there by summiteers from the start of October, at the point they had taken for the summit. Beyond it, the slope grows even thinner. The ridge narrows to a strip a couple of steps wide. There is less and less to stand on, the drop is ever closer, and the character of the route changes before their eyes. The Japanese keep moving. At some point, the fixed ropes simply end. The last anchor, the last piece of rope, and beyond it, bare snow. The Sherpas of the fixing team that season decided not to go higher. The terrain ahead was too dangerous in shape, and putting ropes there would have meant risking their own people. Their lines broke off about 20 meters short of the true peak, on that very deceptive platform that most take for the summit. Almost every group this season stopped here and turned back down. They called it a summit and descended along their ropes. The Japanese keep a different tally. Takano and Hirotaka want to stand on the highest point of the mountain, not on its shoulder. They unclip from the safety line and carefully step forward. The snow cornice beneath them is set up treacherously. From below, it looks like a continuation of the ridge, a wide white band, reliable in appearance. From above, it is a thin snow crust hanging over the void with nothing beneath it. Underfoot is emptiness covered by a surface that feels solid. Experienced climbers know about this effect, but it is one thing to know it, and another to be standing on it in the dense morning air at altitude. A few steps to the summit, Hirotaka takes out his smartphone, wants to capture the moment. In the frame is Professor Takano against the sky and clouds, an upright silhouette at the very top. That shot was meant to be the proof that they had reached the very top. At the moment of the shot, the support under Hirotaka's feet gives way. The cornice breaks off in a large piece. The student goes down, on the opposite side of the ridge. Takano is left alone, a few meters short of the true summit. He stands above the break. Beneath him is snow, with an unpredictable foundation. Any sharp movement could cost a second life. Throwing himself after his student is impossible. Takano steps back to the ropes, slowly, along his own tracks. From there, he descends alone. Through the entire upper section, through camps 4, 3, 2, along the same line they had climbed together. He reaches base camp drained. His account will remain the only source about what happened. The Cosmo Trek operator raises the alarm and contacts the Nepalese rescue services. The very next day, helicopters begin flying over the massif. Sweeps at the upper limit of what is possible, inspection of the glacier below, runs into the side couloirs. Sherpas from nearby teams climb higher along their own routes and check the likely lines of the fall. No trace. The searches go on daily for almost a week. Every morning, hope returns with the takeoff, and every evening, it dies down. The body could have gone over to the far side of the mountain, into a zone neither a helicopter nor people can reach. A collapsed slab of snow could easily have covered the signs of the fall. The mountain hides things like this neatly. It does not give back those it took in such a geometry. By mid-October, it becomes clear. Hirotaka cannot be found from the air. At base camp, they still wait, but only one thing remains to wait for: the arrival of his parents. On October 11th, a flight from Tokyo lands in Kathmandu. Hirotaka's father and mother step off the plane. They are met at the Cosmo Trek office. Spread out on the operator's desk are maps of the massif, helicopter reports, and a list of sectors already searched. The parents stay in Nepal for several days. Every morning, a new flight toward the mountain. Every evening, the same answer: nothing. Sherpas, rescuers, representatives of the operator speak with them. By the end of the week, it is clear. The active search is being wound down. The body of Hirotaka Onodera remains on the mountain, and he is officially declared dead. The farewell will later be held in Japan, without a son, without a place to come to. The story quickly spreads beyond Cosmo Trek. Russell Bryce, a veteran of the commercial company Himex, speaks publicly and sharply. In his words, a man died for nothing. In earlier years, the ropes on that section had always been brought all the way to the true summit, and he had done it himself. In 2016, the responsible fixing team did not finish the work. The fixed ropes stopped at a false summit, and the risk passed directly to the climbers. After Hirotaka's death, the old conversation about Manaslu's false summit for the first time becomes a conversation about a specific name, not about abstract statistics. And here is something else that lingers. The same massif that once first welcomed the Japanese onto its summit, in the autumn of 2016, became the place where a Japanese man died. In the years that follow, the statistics will grow. A Polish climber 3 years later, a Canadian operator 5 years later, and a small group within a single week in the autumn of 2022. Manaslu remains on the list of the most dangerous 8,000ers. 4:45 in the morning, the 23rd of September, 2012. Camp 3 on Manaslu, about 7,000 meters up. Inside, 25 tents are sleeping Chamonix guides, a Spaniard, a German, a Canadian, an Italian, Sherpas from different teams. 400 meters higher, an ice tower 600 meters wide hangs above them. Everyone knows about it. Nobody likes to talk about it. In 1 minute, it will release. 11 people will not live to see the dawn. One skier in a sleeping bag will fly 270 meters down the slope and stand up on his feet. The northeast face. Camp 3 sits on a narrow shelf between two ridges at 7,000 meters. There is almost nowhere else flat nearby. Everything is either steeper or in the line of rockfall. The camp was placed here 10 years ago, and every season it goes back in the same spot. The tower above is called a serac and treated as scenery. It has hung there for ages, has never come down, so it never will. The whole route rested on that single so. This season there are more people on the mountain than ever before. Around 30 teams, 231 climbers holding permits. The reason is prosaic. In the spring, China closed access to Cho Oyu, and the big operators, Altitude Junkies, Himex, Mountain Kingdom, Asian Trekking, Seven Summits Treks, rebooked their clients onto Manaslu. For most of them, this is the first 8,000er of their lives. By the night of the 22nd to the 23rd, around 30 people are stacked on this shelf. French clients with their guides, Spaniards, a German, a Canadian, an Italian, porters and high-altitude Sherpas from different expeditions, all of them under the same tower. In one of the tents lie 3 men, whose names will be on every front page within a day. Remy Lecluse, Gregory Costa, Glenn Plake. They have called the project Moguls to Manaslu, climb to the summit and ski back down without supplemental oxygen. Nobody had ever come off Manaslu that way before. Lecluse is 48, a guide with the Compagnie de Guides de Chamonix, the oldest guides association in the world, where only a handful are accepted. In ski mountaineering, they call him the godfather of steep skiing. The first descents on 55-degree slopes in the Alps, in Peru, in the Himalayas were opened by him. Costa, his younger partner, is also a Chamonix guide. They have climbed together for more than 10 years. Plake is the third. A Californian, on skis since age 3, 3-time world champion in hot dog skiing. A multicolored mohawk almost 30 centimeters tall. In 1988, he starred in The Blizzard of Oz, the film that essentially launched the genre of modern ski cinema. Right now they are lying in adjacent tents, side by side. This night, as they had pictured it, is the last relatively quiet stretch before summit day. On the 21st and 22nd, heavy snowfall with blizzard winds hits the slopes. Those already high up sit in their tents and wait. The summit push is bumped back, night after night. Most teams eventually converge on a single window, depart on the night of the 23rd into the 24th. Because of that delay, the morning of the 23rd will find this many people stacked at Camp 3. The same 2 days are loading the serac. A thick layer of fresh snow piles onto the upper slab at 7,400. Underneath, beneath the crust of old ice, a slow melt continues. Himalayan glaciers have been retreating faster over the last 30 years than they did in the era of the first expeditions. A week later, Mark Horrell and Alan Arnett will sum it up in a single line in their postmortems. More weight on top, melt underneath. On the evening of the 22nd, the same plan moves across the radios. Wake up at 4:30, leave for Camp 4 by dawn, summit on the 24th. 30 people from different teams have to squeeze into that window. In some tents, crampons and harnesses are placed next to the sleeping bags, ready to grab. In others, climbers try to catch the last hours of sleep. The tower above does nothing. It just hangs. Sunday. Several survivors will later be found, wearing wristwatches stopped at almost the same number. 4:45 Nepali time, an hour before dawn. Inside the tents, people are already stirring. At 7,400, a serac slab, roughly 600 meters wide, breaks off in a wide strip. From above the camp comes a muffled crack, like a long, low roll of thunder. For the first few seconds, those inside the tents take the noise for a gust of wind. In the next tent over, Costa elbows Plake and tells him he can hear an avalanche. That, as Plake will later tell CBS, was the last thing he ever heard his friend say. After that, seconds, not minutes. A mass of ice and snow falls straight down on the camp, gathering speed over a 400-meter drop. Ahead of the front comes an air blast wave strong enough to tear a grown man off his ice axe. Behind it comes the body of the avalanche, chunks of ice the size of a wardrobe, compressed snow, fixed-line wands ripped from the ground. The tents of Camp 3 do not resist for a second. They crumple, split at the seams, and are carried away down the slope. Lower down, at Camp 2 at 6,300, the bulk of the mass no longer reaches, but the air wave is enough to tear away half the tents there. Somewhere in the lower third of that mass, Glenn Plake is flying, in his sleeping bag, with a foam pad and a thin layer of nylon over him. That combination will be enough to save his life. Rescuers will later reconstruct the trajectory from the debris. The avalanche dragged the tent roughly 270 meters down. When everything finally stops, he is in the dark. He yanks the zipper. He claws at the outer fly with his bare hands. The buckles are gone. Above his head is the night sky. 5 in the morning. He gets to his feet and feels at his chest for the avalanche transceiver. The device is on. Before moving up to Camp 3, he and Costa and Lecluse had agreed. Beacons stay on even inside the sleeping bags. Plake sweeps the transceiver in an arc. The screen shows no incoming signal. Either the other 2 beacons were destroyed on impact, or they are simply too far away. He calls out their names. His voice clots in the night air. He climbs back up along the debris fan, digging out scraps of fabric with his hands wherever he sees torn nylon. There is nobody inside. By 6 in the morning, the sky is lightening. On the surviving patches of Camp 3, those whose tents were on the edge of the main strip crawl out of the snow. Radio calls go down, to base camp and to Samagaon. From base camp, the coordination is taken over by Phil Crampton, the leader of Altitude Junkies. The teams lower down send Sherpas up toward Camp 2. By 7, the first wave reaches Camp 2, shattered tents, wounded climbers. By 8, the weather opens its first narrow window. A fishtail air helicopter lifts off above Samagaon. An hour later, a Simric airship follows. The pilots thread between the clouds at the absolute ceiling of their working altitude. The wounded and frostbitten are flown down to base camp, from there to Samagaon. And from Samagaon, some are forwarded onward to Kathmandu. Bodies are carried down the slope by hand and hung on long lines beneath the small helicopters. By the end of the first week, Nepal's Ministry of Tourism and the consulates published the consolidated figures. In the first 24 hours, the number being repeated was 9. The final count is 11 dead. 6 of the names on the list are French from the Chamonix rope team. Remy Lecluse, guide and skier, 48 years old. Gregory Costa, his partner, also a guide. Ludovic Chalit, known as Ludo. Fabrice Prier, Catherine Ricard, and Philippe Beau, experienced amateur climbers. In a single morning, Chamonix loses 6 of its own. The guiding community of the town has not been hit this hard in 20 years. The 7th is Martí Gasol i Roig, 43, from Barcelona. Not a professional climber, but a Catalan public figure, the founder of Plataforma per la Llengua. The 8th is Christian Mittermeier, a German citizen. The 9th is Dominique Ouimet, a Swiss-Canadian climber. The 10th is Alberto Magliano of Italy. The 11th is Dawa Sherpa, a Nepali high-altitude guide. The names of the other Nepali porters who died that night are barely mentioned by the Western press in 2012. They appear as a single line, several Sherpas. That picture will only begin to be corrected 10 years later. A week after the disaster, a group of 7 Sherpas with shovels, ropes, and probes climbs up the avalanche debris fan. Roughly 600 meters below Camp 3, in one of the glacier's crevasses, they find Remy Lecluse. 25 meters down. Pulling him out takes the rest of the day. By morning, the body is already moving down. Camp 2, base camp, then helicopter to Samagaon and Kathmandu. The French consulate receives him in early October. They search for Costa nearby, and never found him. He will not be found, not that season nor in the seasons that follow. Some of the Nepali porters' bodies also remain beneath the avalanche. After a week, the search is called off. On the 2nd of October, in Chamonix, a memorial service is held in the chapel on the hill above the town. 2 names are spoken aloud, Remy Lecluse and Gregory Costa. The guides of the Compagnie de Guide de Chamonix stand together in a single rank. Over the last 20 years, the town has never lost 2 of its professional guides in one night on the same mountain. In the same days, a man no journalist expected to see alive appears in front of the cameras in Kathmandu. Glenn Plake. His first interview goes to CBS, then Outside Online, then live segments for Anderson Cooper, 360, and Epic TV. In the CBS conversation, he drops a line that will later spread across headlines in every language. I'm probably one of the luckiest people in the world. It sounds like an exhalation. But after that, Plake speaks about anything but luck. He starts breaking down what happened, about the serac that everyone on the mountain knows about, the one rookies are warned about from their first day in base camp, about the commercial system that, after Cho Oyu was closed, funnels 231 clients onto a single mountain and bears no formal responsibility for any of it. About how a camp pitched directly under the fall line of a known serac is not the stupidity of one guide, but the silent consensus of an entire industry. Moving the shelf to one side is expensive and inconvenient, so it is easier to accept the risk. In that moment, Plake stops being just a celebrity skier. He becomes a witness in a case nobody ever formally opened. His testimony will form the spine of several documentary pieces over the next 5 years. On the mountain itself, the season continues. After the 23rd of September, roughly half of the teams pack up their expeditions and head down. Base camp empties out. Tents are folded. Loads are transferred to yaks. The caravans stretch back towards Samagaon. The other half stays. Among those who push for the summit after the disaster is Phil Crampton's altitude junkies. Some of their clients and Sherpas reach the top in the first days of October. The members of that summit team will later say, "Not going up would have been a betrayal of those who had prepared specifically for this push." In their October analyses, Mark Horrell and Alan Arnett put two blunt questions on the table. Can Camp 3 legitimately be pitched under a known serac at all? And should Nepal's permit system limit the number of teams on one mountain in a single season? Both questions stay rhetorical. No ministry imposes any restriction. No operator gives up the old site for Camp 3. By the following season, Manaslu is fully reopened. The serac still hangs there. The camp goes back in the same place. What follows is a 10-year loop. For the first 2 or 3 seasons, teams nudge the shelf a little lower and a little to one side. Within 5 years, the compromise erodes. The snow falls differently, flat ground is scarce, and the point creeps back. By the start of the 2020s, Camp 3 is sitting almost exactly on the coordinates of 2012. In the autumn of 2022, another big commercial wave rolls into Manaslu. In September, another mass of snow and ice releases off the slopes. It buries base camp, then the line between Camp 2 and Camp 3. People from various teams die. In an interview that season, the head of one Austrian company says 3 words that span the decade. Same as 2012. That line, in the very first story of this collection, sounded like a dark hint. Here, it gets a name and a date. Camp 3, 4:45 in the morning. The 23rd of September, 2012. A serac 600 meters wide. 6 Chamonix guides, a Catalan activist, a German, a Canadian, an Italian, a Nepali Sherpa. 11 lines in a ministry report. And the practice by which, 10 years later, the same tents go back on the same shelf under the same serac. In Slovenian bookshops, a book from 1981 still sits on the shelves. It's called Pot, The Way. It's been reprinted 9 times, and people learn how to read a mountain from it. Its author, by the age of 27, had become the first Slovenian on Everest and had opened new routes on 3 8,000ers. 4 years later, in April of 1983, a single dry crack above Camp 1 on the south face of Manaslu killed him. This is the story of Nejc Zaplotnik, the man who wrote the Balkans their climbing philosophy and who remained himself beneath an ice tower on the 8th highest mountain on the planet. The morning on the south face of Manaslu is calm. No wind, not a cloud. 3 climbers are coming down the fixed ropes from Camp 2 to Camp 1, roped together with a 4th man above them on belay. Half a kilometer higher, a balcony of ice and gray seracs hangs over the slope. The team is Yugoslav. The route a new line up the south face, never climbed by anyone before. Among these men is Nejc Zaplotnik, 31 years old, a Slovenian from Kranj. 9 days ago, they celebrated his birthday in base camp. In the bookshops of Ljubljana, his pot is already on its 2nd printing. Within seconds, only one of the group will be alive. In Kranj, the boy was born on the 15th of April, 1952. On paper, Nejc. At home and at school, Nejc. From early childhood, he carries 2 heavy diagnoses: celiac disease and rheumatoid arthritis. The prognoses are cautious. Every summer, his parents send him to his cousin's farm in the foothills. And there, on the slopes, the main thing happens. The boy steps onto a trail, and the pain leaves him. At 17, he joins the climbing club in Kranj. A year later, the Slovenian Mountain Rescue Service. He studies in Ljubljana, then transfers to the Faculty of Physical Education. By day, he teaches gym class at a school. In the 70s, socialist Yugoslavia bets on the mountains in a way that almost no one else in Eastern Europe does. The state funds national expeditions to the Himalaya and the Karakoram. A climber from Ljubljana or Split has the status of an Olympic athlete. Behind it all stand the names of Aleš Kunever and Stan Belak, known by his nickname Shrauf, coaches who push the young generation not onto classic routes but onto technical walls. Small teams, no oxygen. This style will later be called alpine. Zaplotnik enters the system through the Kranj club. His rope partner quickly becomes Andrei Stremfelia, a boy from the same town, a couple of years older. For the next 10 years, all of Slovenia will know that pairing by sight. The first big target is Makalu, the fifth highest peak in the world, 8,485 meters, on the border of Nepal and Tibet. The Yugoslav national expedition picks not the classic line, already climbed by the French and the Poles, but the south face, technically one of the hardest walls on any 8,000er. Zaplotnik is taken into the summit group. The wall grinds them down. Snow gullies turn into rock buttresses into iced-over chimneys. Bivouacs happen on narrow ledges, tents hanging from anchors. On the 8th of October, 1975, the 23-year-old Slovenian stands on the summit of Makalu. The climb is recognized as one of the best technical achievements of the season. In Kranj, he is met as a national hero. In Ljubljana, his portrait runs in the papers. He himself takes it quietly. He'll later write that a summit is empty if a man walked to it the wrong way. 2 years later, the team flies to Pakistan. The goal is Hidden Peak. Gasherbrum 1, 8,080 meters. The route, the southwest ridge, never climbed before. The summit pair is Zaplotnik and Stremfeli. On the 8th of July, 1977, they reach the top. But one of the team, Drago Bregar, never comes back from the mountain. His body is never found. On the same expedition, Zaplotnik gives up his own chance at a second peak to an older teammate. Later, in the book, one line will appear that gets quoted more than any other. Friendship is worth far more than success. In 1979, the national team goes to Everest. They choose the hardest existing route, the West Ridge Direct. At around 8,700 meters, Zaplotnik's oxygen apparatus fails. The leak is tiny, but for a summit push, it's fatal. He stops, spits into the valve, the saliva freezes instantly, the leak seals. On the 13th of May, 1979, Andrei Stremfeli and Nejc Zaplotnik stand on top of the world, the first Slovenians and the first Yugoslavs on Everest. In Ljubljana, he is received at the state level. Strangers recognize the young gym teacher on the street. He is 27. After Everest, he sits down to write. In 1981, Pot, Slovenian for The Way, comes out in Ljubljana. It is not an expedition report. It is the philosophical diary of a climber, with fear in it. Weakness, love for a wife and sons. An argument between a man and himself. One sentence will be repeated across the whole space from Ljubljana to Skopje. He who chases a goal will remain empty once he reaches it. But he who has found the path always carries the goal within himself. Another line is about the battle not with the mountain, but with oneself. By 2009, the book will be in its 9th edition. Between the big expeditions, Zaplotnik lives an ordinary life. School, a brief stint at the accounting office in Kranj. In 1971, he marries Mojca Jamnik. They have 3 sons, Nejc Jr., Luka, and Jaka. In the book, he admits that paperwork drained the life out of him. My life was running through my hands like sand through an hourglass. The Himalaya and Kranj pull him in different directions. But in 75, in 77, in 79, he came home alive. By the early 80s, the golden generation is looking for the next wall. Manaslu, 8,163 meters, beckons with its south face, a line no one has climbed. Technically difficult, avalanche-prone, hung with seracs. A split climbing expedition gathers 16 people. The leader is Vinko Maraves, a Croatian from Split. The team is Slovenians and Croatians. Zaplotnik goes as the key summit climber. The style, no oxygen. The line will go up the south face and exit onto the south ridge. Up to that point, there had not been a single successful attempt here. The team arrives on the mountain in the early spring of 1983. Base camp sits on the Manaslu Glacier. From below, the whole south face is visible. Iced balconies, hanging towers of seracs, narrow couloirs between them. They move fast, placing camps one after another. Within a few weeks, 4 high camps are set up, the top one at around 7,100 meters. The plan is descend, rest, then a final push to the summit. On the 15th of April, Zaplotnik turns 31. They mark his birthday quietly in base camp. Tea and sweets, jokes about his age. 9 days later comes the 24th of April. About 100 meters above Camp 1, a dry crack rings out. Not loud, it sounds like a snapping branch, only the branch is bigger than a house. On the balcony above, a serac breaks off. Ice, rock, snow pour down the gully, gathering mass with every second. 4 men are caught directly under the runout. There is no time to unclip from the ropes. Zaplotnik is moving with Shreten Gregov and Ante Buchan. Vicky Groshely is just above them on the slope at that moment. He sees the whole thing from above and can do nothing. The distance and the line of the avalanche don't even leave time for a shout. Ante Buchan stays under the debris. Shreten Gregov takes heavy injuries but survives. Zaplotnik dies on the spot. He is 31 years and 9 days old. After the tragedy, the expedition calls off the attempt on the south face. Zaplotnik's body is brought down to base camp, then taken through Kathmandu to Ljubljana. In Kranj, all of Slovenia comes to meet him. He is buried in his hometown. His wife Mojka is 29, with 3 sons in her arms. Andrej Stremfeli will say later, "When Nejc died, my house of experience collapsed. It took me a year or more to build that house again." In the book he left behind, there are lines about coming home. They are read at the funeral. Pot is reprinted in the 80s, the 90s, the 2000s. In the climbing clubs of Ljubljana and Kranj, teenagers copy pages out of it by hand. Tomaž Humar, the soloist of the next generation, calls it the main source of his philosophy. Vicky Groshely, the same partner from the last expedition, carries it with him for years. In 1996, Groshely brings Zaplotnik's family to the foot of Manaslu, to a memorial plaque near base camp. They stand above the glacier on which their father remained 13 years earlier. The youngest son, Jaka, looking around at the snow domes, says, "My father was a king. Look what land he chose for his graveyard." That line in Slovenia will later be remembered almost as often as the lines from the book itself. Manaslu in 1983 is a different era. There are no commercial clients, no rescue helicopters, no fixed lines all the way to the summit. Professionals come here from a socialist country and climb the walls in their small teams. The mass wave of Western alpinists is still 2 decades away. 29 years later, on this same mountain, a massive serac will collapse onto a camp packed with clients. The south face line itself, no one has seriously tried it since, and the history of the mountain itself is long, and it began long before 1983. On the 4th of May, 1974, the first all-women team in world history stands on the summit of an 8,000er. 3 Japanese women and a Sherpa on Manaslu, the club flag snapping in the wind, a film camera in hand. 20 minutes, and they begin the descent. The next morning, below them, on a snow shelf above Camp 4, one of them is left behind. The Sherpas will find her ice axe, her oxygen bottle, and her red down jacket with the harness still clipped to it. They will not find Teiko Suzuki herself. She will become the first woman to die on an 8,000er, and the shadow cast by the very record her team had come to Manaslu to set. 1969, Tokyo. The climber Junko Tabe founds the country's first women's climbing club, the Ladies Climbing Club Japan. The motto sounds almost defiant for post-war Japan. We will go abroad on our own, without men. Until then, in big Himalayan expeditions, women were allowed at most into the base camp kitchen. The 8,000ers were closed off. Sponsors shook their heads, husbands forbade it. In 1970, Tabe leads a club team to Annapurna 3 and reaches the summit. Japan sees that women can do it. Then a second team comes together in Tokyo, this time under a different leader, Kyoko Sato. The goal, a real 8,000er. From 1971 onward, the team scrapes together money. Into this circle steps a young, stubborn Teiko Suzuki, for whom the mountains had taken the place of almost everything else. About Suzuki herself, less is known than about any other member of the 1974 expedition. Her exact date of birth is not listed in the open records. What we know is that she grew up among Tokyo's university and club climbers in the early 70s. That narrow stratum where a woman who went into the mountains had to justify every weekend to her parents. By the time of Manaslu, she already had the Japanese Alps behind her, ice training, and several technical routes in the Karakoram. On the team, she is placed not in the lead summit rope, but in support, carrying loads between the upper camps and belaying those going higher. This is not a mark of second class. The climbing leader Naoko Nakaseko would later describe her in a single line in the English report: the most passionate, the most burning member who carried a huge share of the expedition on her own shoulders. By the winter of 1973, the roster is set. 15 Japanese women, including a doctor and a manager, not a single male climber. The overall leader, Kyoko Sato, the climbing leader on the mountain, Naoko Nakaseko. Listed alongside Suzuki are Tsune Kuroishi, Masako Uchida, Mieko Mori, Michiko Sekida, Masako Itakura, Mutsumi Nakajima, Tomoko Ito, Shizu Harada, and Naoko Kuribayashi. The main problem in preparation is money. The big sponsors all turn them down with the same phrase: women on an 8,000er, that's insane. Part of the budget the members raise themselves. They sell belongings, take out loans against their salaries. The Japanese Federation gives its blessing, but no major funding. When the money finally comes together, the choice of mountain is made without long debate: Manaslu. On the 13th of February 1974, the column sets out from Kathmandu. 15 women and a long tail of porters. By the 25th of February, the expedition reaches the village of Sama, the last inhabited point before the glacier. In early March, at 4,400 meters, they raise the base camp flag. The first chosen line is the East Ridge. After 2 weeks of work, the team is bogged down in waist-deep snow and serious avalanche danger. You can't string a route through snow like that. In April, Saito and Nakaseko switch the line and go up the northeast face. Over the following month, the camps go up on the wall. Camp 1, Camp 2 at 5,900, Camp 3 at 6,500, Camp 4 at 7,150, Camp 5 at 7,650. Suzuki hauls loads into every one of them and works at the edge of her strength. By the end of April, the forecast promises a short window of good weather. The leaders gather everyone for a brief meeting at base camp and announce the lineup. 4 are picked for the summit push: Nakaseko, Masako Uchida, Mieko Mori, and Jangbu Sherpa. Sato stays below to run the expedition from base camp. The second group is in support. Its job is to back up the summit team in the upper camps. In that second group is Suzuki. She is given the task of hauling oxygen and gear from Camp 4 to Camp 5, so that, weather and strength permitting, a second women's rope could also make a bid for the top. No arguments. Each one has known her role since base camp. On the 3rd of May, the 4-person summit team leaves Camp 4 for Camp 5 and pitches their tents at 7,650. On the morning of the 4th of May, Nakaseko, Uchida, Mori, and Jangbu set out from Camp 5 for the summit. The snow on the ridge is knee-deep. The wind is not strong. Visibility is good. The rope team moves slowly. Above 8,000 meters, every step counts. The oxygen is being burned through at an even rate, 1 bottle per person. At 5:30 in the evening, 4 figures stand on the summit of Manaslu: Nakaseko, Uchida, Mori, and Jangbu Sherpa. 3 Japanese women and a Sherpa. The first all-women team in the history of world mountaineering to set foot on an 8,000er. They linger on the summit for about 20 minutes. The Japanese flag, the club flag, a few frames on the film camera. The descent to Camp 5 is already in the dark. All of them come down alive. Uchida has frostbitten fingers. A night in tents at 7,650. On the morning of the 5th of May, the 3 women and Jangbu start down, toward Camp 4 and lower. That same morning, in Camp 4, Suzuki and Tomoko Ito are getting ready to move up. 8:30 in the morning. Tomoko Ito steps out of the tent. She goes first, toward Camp 5. An hour later, Teiko Suzuki follows. On her back is an oxygen bottle and a rucksack with cargo for the upper camp. In her hand, an ice axe. Over her down clothing, she wears her distinctive red down jacket, with a harness over the jacket and crampons on her boots. The climb takes a long time. By midday, the summit team coming down from the top, and Camp 5 meets Suzuki at the 7,300 mark. Nakaseko would later set down a phrase that ended up in the English report: her face looked a little swollen. Suzuki does not complain about anything. She waves her hand, says she is going on. The group continues its descent. That is the last time her companions see her alive. A little higher up, already at 7,550, the Sherpas pass Suzuki. She is moving slowly, but she is fine. Around 2 in the afternoon, a cloud rolls onto the ridge. By 3:30, the wind picks up. Visibility drops to 10 meters, a snow haze in which your own tracks vanish after 20 steps. At 6 in the evening, on the scheduled radio check, the tent at Camp 4 turns on the set and calls Camp 5. Have Suzuki and Ito made it? Camp 5 is silent. No one answers there because no one has reached it. At base, Camp Sato declares an emergency. Every radio on the mountain stays on without pause. At 10:45 at night, Ito comes stumbling into Camp 4 alone. She drops to her knees at the tent entrance and gives the report that sounds like a verdict. She did not find Camp 5. She did not see Suzuki in the blizzard. The night at Camp 4 passes without sleep. Everyone knows where Suzuki is right now, alone, at 7,500 meters, in the dark, in a storm. At dawn on the 6th of May, the blizzard pulls back. Visibility returns. 3 Sherpas leave the tents and follow the line of yesterday's climb. At the upper edge of what the report calls the snow apron, a wide sloping shelf above Camp 4, they find the first objects. Her ice axe is lying there. Next to it, an oxygen bottle. On the ice axe, an open rucksack, as if a person had taken off the load and had no time to gather it back up. A little to the side, on the snow, her red down jacket with the harness still clipped on. No body. The Sherpas understand what has happened even before they radio it down to base. Suzuki has fallen from the snow apron down onto the Manaslu glacier. The drop from where her gear lies to the glacier is roughly a kilometer of vertical, down a steep ice slope. No one will be able to find her at the bottom. There are no witnesses to the fall. The theories are pieced together from the gear and from the logic of the slope. The first, the most straightforward. On hard fern, Suzuki slipped, had no time to self-arrest with her ice axe, and slid down the steep face. The second theory, a cornice. A piece of snow cornice broke off under her weight, and the chunks that landed nearby give this version indirect support. The third, a local slab. On the snow shelves of Manaslu, even a meter of fresh, wind-loaded snow gives off slides that can carry a person a kilometer down. None of the 3 theories contradict the others. The night before, there had been a blizzard, wind, poorly bonded fern. Suzuki was carrying a heavy load, moving alone, with no rope partner. She was climbing past 7,000 for the second time in 2 days. Any one of these factors would have been enough to stop her halfway. Suzuki did not stop. On the 7th of May, the search team climbs up the snow apron again, in case anything has changed in the night. Nothing has. The weather is turning, the avalanche danger is rising. On the 8th, Sato makes the second heavy decision of the week. Call off the search and pull the team off the upper camps. On a hill near base camp, with a view of the northeast face, the women build a cairn out of stones. Inside, they place Suzuki's ice axe and her personal belongings. On top, the club flag and a Japanese plaque with her name. That spot will be visible from the route for future expeditions for many years to come. On the 13th of May, the team breaks down base camp and walks out, back towards Sama. Almost no one speaks along the way. At the end of May, the team flies into Tokyo. At the airfield, they are met by cameras, newspapermen, and Federation officials. The front page of the evening editions goes out in large type. Japanese women are the first in the world to climb an 8,000er. Just below, in a black border, runs a short line. Teiko Suzuki did not return. Sato and Nakaseko give the press conference dryly, in facts, without posing. The Suzuki family comes onto the stage together with the team. Sato hands them the flag that had been on the summit, and a small bundle of personal belongings that they had been able to bring down off the mountain. The Japanese Alpine Federation awards Suzuki posthumously. A year later, on the 16th of May, 1975, Junko Tabei will become the first woman to stand on the summit of Everest. Without what the Sato team did in 1974, Tabei's climb would not have been possible. Suzuki's name in that chain ends up on the backside. The record was achieved, but at her cost. In Japanese mountaineering, the 1974 expedition is remembered in 2 ways. On one side, Japanese women opened the 8,000ers to women. On the other, the snow apron above Camp 4, on which one of the climbers was left behind. Suzuki wrote no memoir, no book. What survives of her are short entries in the team diary and one line in the English report, the most passionate. 42 years later, that same mountain will take another Japanese climber, with no trace and no body. Manaslu was killing people before Suzuki. 2 years before her climb, 15 people died here. We will come back to that story. In the club archives in Tokyo, her ice axe and a scrap of the red jacket are kept. On the hill above base camp, the cairn still stands. A small pyramid of stones over an empty place because Teiko Suzuki herself is not there. April 10th, 1972. Just before midnight. On a snow shelf at 6,500 meters, 15 people are sleeping, 4 Koreans, a Japanese cameraman, and 10 Nepali porters. In a few seconds, their camp will be gone. Above them hangs an enormous block of ice. It has been gathering weight through an entire week of snowfall. Until this night, Manaslu has no international nickname. By morning, it will have one, and it will stick forever. This is the story of one expedition by the Kim family, after which the 8th highest peak on the planet inherited its grim name, Killer Mountain, and of what made the eldest brother send first one younger brother to this wall and then a second. Spring of 1972, Seoul. At a small family cemetery just outside the city, a few men in black coats are standing. They are burying a son of the Kim family whose body never came home. A year earlier, he had gone into the high Himalayas and never returned from the slope of an 8,000er in central Nepal. Instead of remains, the family received an empty coffin, a name on a stone, and a formal note from the Nepali authorities. That same day, the eldest brother, Kim Sup, makes a decision that will overturn the lives of several families at once. The expedition is going back to the same mountain in the following season. The route is partly scouted. The team knows where to place the camps and where the fixed ropes will run. The family refuses to walk away halfway. This is no longer sport. It is a family debt, and at the same time, a national matter. The Korean flag has not yet stood on a single one of the 14 8,000ers on the planet. In early 1970s Seoul, this is considered shameful. High-altitude climbing there is a way to show the country to the world. The money is raised through sponsor contributions and a state grant. The expedition plan ends up on the desk of the country's president personally. The youngest brother, Kim Sup, who has not yet finished mourning the middle one, announces that he is going with the team. So, in the 1972 expedition, the Kim family is sending 2 brothers at once. They are joined by 2 more Koreans, a Japanese climber, and 10 Nepali Sherpas. Late February of 1972, Kathmandu. At a dusty warehouse on the northern edge of the city, the expedition cargo is being stacked. The Koreans check their permit, the Nepali Ministry of Tourism's authorization to work on the northeast face. 16 years earlier, the Japanese climber Toshio Imanishi and the Sherpa Gyaltsen Norbu went up this very face, the same 2 who first set foot on the summit of Manaslu. The line is a classic, long, unpleasant in its lower section, but at altitude it accepts camps in a normal way. The Sherpas for the team are recruited in the Solukhumbu Valley, the homeland of high-altitude porters. 10 experienced men of various ages, each with at least one job above 7,000 meters behind him. In Korean and Japanese magazines, their names will later appear in short lists, without photographs. At home, in Namche Bazaar, they are known by nicknames and by family. Some of them have already been on Manaslu before, with the Japanese in 1956, with a British reconnaissance in 1953. For them, this mountain is not an abstraction, but a specific slope on which their fathers and older brothers once walked. The porter caravan leaves Kathmandu in early March. By the end of the month, the Koreans are at base camp on the glacier below the northeast face. Kim Sup bets on speed. The monsoon comes in early June, and every day before it counts. They work in the classic siege style, a chain of camps moving upward, fixed lines on the key sections, shuttle runs by porters carrying loads. By April 7, 1972, the lead party is already at Camp 4, at 7,200 meters. The summit is less than 1,000 vertical meters away. For the first time in all this family's attempts, the team genuinely believes they are going to make it. From the upper outpost, the group drops down to rest. Above 7,000 meters, a person wears out fast, and the only way to recover before a summit push is to lose altitude and sleep where the air is denser. The rope teams come down the fixed lines and by evening regroup in Camp 3 at 6,500 meters. By the night of April 9th, Camp 3 becomes the most populated spot on the expedition. On a small snow platform stand several tents. Inside are 15 people, 4 Koreans, the Japanese cameraman Kazunari Yasuhisa, and 10 Sherpas. Some lie 2 to a tent, the rest 3 to a tent in the large expedition shelters. Down the slope, the fixed lines run to Camp 2. Higher up, about half a kilometer away horizontally, hangs a large ice tower, a serac. After the recent snowfalls, its cap has been growing heavier day by day. The Camp 3 platform was chosen from the Japanese map of 1956 and from the previous year's scouting. In all that time, nothing had happened on it. And from that, a simple thing was concluded. If it was safe yesterday, it is safe today. By midnight, all 15 are asleep in the tents. In the night between the 9th and 10th of April, 1972, something shifts on the slope above Camp 3. The serac, weighed down over the last few days, breaks off the glacier in a single piece. An ice wall as tall as a 5-story building tears down the slope, gathering speed. In a few seconds, it sweeps along with it the snow slab from the upper plateau. The avalanche front opens up over hundreds of meters. In the darkness, nothing can be seen. Only a rising low rumble, like a freight train. A couple of seconds more, and the mass covers the platform at 6,500 meters. There is no longer a Camp 3 on the slope. The tents are crushed and carried down along with the people. No one has time to get out. No one even has time to shout. The window for reaction in an event like this is a fraction of a second, and even those who slept right against the tent wall do not get it. At the very edge of the wave are 2 Sherpas and the youngest brother of the expedition leader. Ki Sup had been lying along the outer wall of the tent, closer to the edge of the platform. He is scooped up together with the fabric and his sleeping bag and thrown downward. The snow mass runs along the slope for nearly 800 vertical meters, and the 3 of them are dragged with it. Halfway down, they are tumbled, flipped, and their gear scatters in every direction. As the first wave dies down, a second smaller slide comes from above and pulls these 3 another 300 meters lower. The avalanche comes to a stop near the lower edge of the slope, not far from Camp 2. The snow settles, and over the slope, in the darkness, complete silence hangs. The first to come to is one of the Sherpas. A few minutes later, the second one starts to stir nearby, and a little to the side, Ki Sup as well. He has broken ribs, a frostbitten face, no boots. But he is alive. The 3 of them dig themselves out of the snow by themselves. They shout upward toward Camp 3. From the wall, no one answers. Not a single headlamp. On the slope above is a flat black stretch where, an hour ago, the stoves were burning. Out of the entire expedition that night, these 3 are the only ones left alive. By the morning of April 10th, the injured men crawl down to Camp 2 at 6,100 meters. 2 Sherpas, left below for the rotation, meet them there. From them, the first short message goes by, radio to base camp. Camp 3 is gone, 3 alive, the rest are under the avalanche. At base, the message is taken by the radio operator and passed further on, through the diplomatic line to Seoul. An hour later, a search party leaves base. From a point on the lower moraine, the slope is visible all the way to Camp 2, and nothing more. Over the empty spot is the same morning sky as the day before. The mountain gives no sign that anything has just happened. On April 10th and 11th, a group from base in Camp 2 climbs into the avalanche zone. After just a few hours of work, it is clear. No one can be pulled out from under it. In places, the snow debris is 30 meters deep. Scattered across the slope are torn pieces of tents, shredded down jackets, oxygen bottles, pots, boots. Almost no personal belongings. After 2 days, the search is called off. Every extra hour up there raises the chance of another slide. The serac above Camp 3 did not all come down, and the same kind of ice blocks still hang over the slope. The team makes a decision that is hard for the families in Seoul and Solukhumbu. But, in the Himalayan logic of the 1970s, the only one possible, the bodies are left in the mountain. On the morning of April 13th, 1972, the expedition formally closes its work on the face. By that point, the telegram from the Nepali border is already reaching the Kim family in Seoul. At the same cemetery outside the city, where the first empty grave appeared in the spring, there will now be two. A year ago, the family lost the middle brother, now the eldest, the one who made the decision to go back to this mountain. Among the dead Koreans is Kim Sup himself, the expedition leader, and two of his countrymen. The Japanese member is Kazunari Yasuhisa, the cameraman who went with the team to shoot a documentary film. In the Korean Chronicle of 1972, he remains the only foreigner among the victims. 8 dead Nepali Sherpas, for the Western press, stay nameless. In Solukhumbu, by contrast, every one of those names is known by heart. Over the summer of 1972, on the cairns at Namche Bazaar and Kunde, 8 new plaques appear with Nepali names and the date of April 10th. In Seoul, on the Central State Square, a national memorial ceremony is held in early May. The empty coffins of the Korean climbers stand side by side, with flags and photographs in front of them. The wreath is laid personally by the president of the country. The first dispatches go out through the news agencies within a week. In the earliest reports, the death toll is rounded up to 15, the number of people sleeping in the tents. The corrected figure of 12 dead and 3 survivors will appear in the Korean reports later. Until April 10, 1972, no Himalayan expedition had ever lost so many people in a single slide. Journalists in London, New York, and Tokyo pull out of their archives a nickname that had only surfaced occasionally before: Killer Mountain, literally the mountain that kills. From the spring of 1972 on, it becomes international. In English and French dispatches, it is used as if it has long been the standard name, without explanation. In the Korean papers, a version of their own appears: Sari Nui San, the Killer Mountain. School geography textbooks will quickly pick it up. The Japanese climbers, for whom this peak had been a point of national pride since 1956, accept the new name in silence. And here is what is strange. Manaslu is not Everest in height, not K2 in technical difficulty. A moderate altitude, an accessible route, and 12 dead in a single night. This paradox of ranking only cements the mountain's grim reputation. The record set in April 1972 will hold across the Himalayas for more than 20 years. After the disaster, the Nepali Ministry of Tourism temporarily stops issuing new permits for the northeast face. In the Sherpa Professional Association in Namche Bazaar, the loss of 10 high-altitude porters in a single night raises a conversation that had never been voiced so loudly before. The Korean club commits to paying the families of the dead Sherpas an annual pension for several years. The size of each payment is comparable to the average income of a family in Solukhumbu. The face itself and the Camp 3 platform at 6,500 meters remain a minefield for later expeditions. The next teams move the platform slightly to one side, into the shelter of a rocky ridge. On the old April 1972 platform, no one ever sets up camp again. There will be no Koreans on Manaslu for almost 5 more years, and the first Korean summit on an 8,000er will in the end happen not here, but in 1977, on Everest. 40 years later, in the autumn of 2012, on this very mountain, a serac will come down in exactly the same way, from the upper slope onto a sleeping camp. Not the same piece of ice. Across 4 decades, the glacier will redraw its upper edge many times over. But the point of release and the scenario itself will repeat almost one for one. The rules of the game by then will be different. Weather forecasts, satellite phones, helicopters for evacuation, professional rope-fixing Sherpas. And the serac will do its job almost literally. The same season, the same slope, the same outcome. That is already a separate long conversation, and the viewer of this collection already knows that second story. What matters here is something else. After April 1972, no experienced high-altitude guide on this mountain considers Camp 3 safe in itself any longer. Any tent under a serac is a deferred bill. That rule was set precisely by the night of April 9th to 10th, 1972, in which 12 people died at once. To understand how Kim Sup ended up leading the 1972 expedition, we have to go back another year. In May of 1971, a smaller Korean team had been climbing this very face. It was a reconnaissance, a trial expedition whose task was to find the line of approach, set out provisional camps, and take a close look at the route. With that first team went the younger brother of Kim Sup, the most gifted of the four Kim brothers, the one for whom the family had foreseen a great climbing future. The trouble of 1971 did not come from a serac, and not from an avalanche. It came from a different point on the route and in a different form. The man whose name the Kim family attached to this entire 8-year chase after the summit died on May 4th, 1971. His name was Ki Sup. He became the first documented victim of Manaslu in its modern record. The story of 1971 is the prologue to everything that happened in the spring of 1972 with his older brother and 11 other people. There, back a year, to the reconnaissance of the northeast face and to the first Korean step into the high Himalayas. The final part of our story will go. Between the first ascent of this mountain and its first victim, 15 years. Everyone you've seen in this collection came to Manaslu already knowing its reputation. Yugoslavs, Japanese, Poles, a Canadian, an American skier, Sherpas. And where did that reputation begin? The 4th of May, 1971, 7,600 meters, a snow bridge in the middle of a wide plateau. Korean climber Ki Sup takes a step, and the snow under his boots gives way. Everything you've just witnessed begins with that single step. South Korea, in the spring of 1971, is living in the mode of a great leap. 20 years earlier, the country lay in ruins after the war. Now, it's building shipyards and factories. In power is Park Chung-hee, a military dictatorship with a hard line on national mobilization. The state needs symbols proving that a young nation is capable of greatness. Mountaineering fits that list naturally. By the spring of 1971, not a single Korean has climbed an 8,000er. The Korean Everest is still 6 years away. The Korean Alpine Club sets its first major goal. The target chosen is Manaslu. 15 years earlier, the Japanese, Toshio Imanishi and Gyaltsen Norbu, had climbed it via the northeast face. The route is documented, the camp positions known. The Koreans decide to follow a proven line. 8 Korean climbers are assembled for the team, among them, 1 woman, a rarity for Korea in the late 60s. Sherpas join the Koreans. The style is classic siege, a chain of camps up to 7,800 meters, fixed ropes, methodical ascent. Leadership goes to Kim Sup, experienced, disciplined, a man of military bearing. With him in the upper rope team is his own brother, Ki Sup. The expedition is sent off in Seoul like an official delegation. No one yet knows that Korea's first attempt to enter the Himalayas will end 2 months later in silence. Manaslu meets the Koreans in April with a pre-monsoon window. Clear days, nights cut by wind. Base camp sits near the moraine. Beyond it lies the work on the face. The northeast line, the same one the Japanese followed 15 years earlier. Long snowfields, ice steps, plateaus above 7,000. 2 brothers work on the mountain. Sup keeps coordination between base and the upper camps. Ki Sup leads the upper team, going first above Camp 2. A word about the Kim family. On the mountain there aren't just 2 brothers. There's half a clan. The eldest Jung Sup stays in Seoul as coordinator, finances, press, government. The youngest, Yai Sup, is still at home in 71. He'll appear on the mountain only a year later. 4 brothers. Manaslu is shared between them all. The team moves loads up in stages. Camp 1 at 5,700. Camp 2 above 6,000. Camp 3 around 6,500. Beyond that stretch, long plateaus laced with crevasse systems under a crust of fresh snow. By early May, camps are established above 7,000 meters. The forecast promises 3 clear days in a row. On the 3rd of May, the summit team pushes out. 5 men, Kim Sup, Ki Sup, and 3 Sherpas. The goal, the summit at 8,163 meters. The camera and the flag are tucked into Ki Sup's jacket pocket. The morning of the 4th of May begins like any summit morning on an 8,000er, cold below -20, frozen oxygen bottles, boots stiff under fingers that won't bend. At about 7,620 meters, the 5 men step out of shelter at 6 in the morning. Ahead lies a wide snow plateau with a gentle tilt toward the summit. Underfoot, it looks even. The fresh snow that fell during the previous 24 hours hides what lies beneath. The team moves in standard Himalayan order. Ki Sup is first, the most experienced of the Koreans at this altitude. Behind him, two Sherpas. Then Sup. The third Sherpa closes the rope. The spacing between climbers, 15 meters. Manaslu is one of those 8,000ers where the main danger isn't a vertical wall, but the vast snow plateaus. The ice beneath them has been splitting apart for millennia, and the crevasses are sealed over each season by fresh snow above. A bridge over emptiness looks exactly like the plateau around it. Ki Sup steps onto the bridge. The snow under his boots sinks, then drops. The fall, about 30 meters down, into a narrow ice slot. The rope snaps taut. The two Sherpas hold the line, drive their axes in, keep the rest of the team from going down with him. The Sherpas lower one of their own to Ki Sup on the rope. By the time he reaches the bottom, there's nothing left to do. It takes about an hour to bring the body back up. On the plateau, the leader stands, pulls back his hood, decides alone, without consulting anyone. The climb is over, they descend. Between the first man to set foot on the summit of Manaslu and the man who will remain on it forever, exactly 15 years. On the 9th of May, 1956, the Japanese Imanishi and Norbu first climbed here. From that day until the 4th of May, 1971, the mountain had killed no one. Ki Sup is its first victim in the entire history of mountaineering. That same season, 3 days after Ki Sup's death, a Japanese team approaches Manaslu from the other side. 11 men climb the northwest spur, a line no one had taken before them. On the 17th of May, 2 of them, Kazuharu Kohara and Motoki, reach the summit. On one slope, the mountain takes a Korean. On the other, it lets the Japanese pass. One season, one mountain, two different sides. Ki Sup's body is brought up from the crevasse and carried down to base camp. From there, through Kathmandu, back to Seoul, newspapers print expedition photos on their front pages. This is Korea's first Himalayan loss, and it becomes a national event. The Korean Alpine Club meets the moment the body arrives. Within a week, the decision is made. They're going back. In Seoul, Ki Sup's death is not considered a defeat. In Korean culture, family duty is a category of its own. If a brother remains on the mountain must be finished. Not avenged, not conquered in some grand phrasing, but completed. There is no other way it works. The return expedition for 72 is announced a few months after the funeral. It will be led by Kim Sup, the same man who stood on the rope above 7,600 meters on the 4th of May. The same one who gave the order to descend. The same one who pulled his brother's body out of the crevasse. The goals are stated openly. Reach the summit. Plant the flag. If possible, recover the brother's body. The youngest brother, Sup, joins this new expedition. 3 of the 4 Kims go to the mountain. Young Sup, as before, stays in Seoul as coordinator. Now, each of the 4 has a defined role. In April 1972, the expedition sets out on the same northeast route, the same camp logic. Only this time, the camps reach up to 7,400. On the 10th of April, near midnight, a massive serac falls onto Camp 3 at 6,500. That night is a separate story in this collection. 15 dead, among them Sup. Sup was lower down the route near Camp 2 and survived by chance. Out of 4 brothers, 2 remain on the mountain. After April 72, the Korean press gives the mountain a nickname, the one under which it will enter world mountaineering, the word that will define its reputation for the next half-century. But the root of this chain isn't in April 1972. It's on a snow plateau on the morning of the 4th of May, 1971. If Ki Sup hadn't fallen into the crevasse, the Koreans wouldn't have returned to the mountain the following spring. Without that return, there would have been no camp at 6,500 for the serac to fall on. Without the serac, the mountain wouldn't have earned its nickname. And without the nickname, Manaslu would have remained, in world mountaineering, simply the 8th highest. Every death you've passed through over the course of this collection, a point on a single line. Everyone who died afterward came to a mountain whose reputation was already set. They knew what they were signing up for. The Yugoslav rope team of 83, 2 Japanese expeditions, the Polish team, the Canadian cameraman, the American skier, the base camp Sherpas of 2022, all of them stepped onto a Manaslu that already had its name. Ki Sup walked onto a mountain that had no name yet. With him, its name began. 51 years of record, more than 80 deaths. The 11 stories you've just gone through, from the avalanche on the 1st of October, 2022, at base camp, to the serac of 83 on the Yugoslav tent, and at the very beginning, one man walking first on the rope on the 4th of May, 1971. 6 in the morning, fresh snow, a snow bridge on a plateau above 7,600. A step. The snow gives way under the boot. His name was Ki Sup. With him, everything you have seen began. Above the place where he remains, 5 years later, in 1976, his elder brother Sup will climb, with the 3rd Korean expedition. On the morning of the 4th of May, exactly on the anniversary, his deputy will remind him of the date. A memorial service will be held on the mountain. After 72, the Kim family will leave Manaslu forever. Of the 4 brothers, 2 will return home alive. Manaslu will remain standing, and the count will go on.